Hi guys, it's me ChazzaHD and welcome to the third and final stream of today here on Saturday, qualifying day of course at Imola for the 2021 Emilia Romagna Grand Prix race preview. And it's going to be a very interesting Grand Prix, a very exciting Grand Prix I believe, and I think this race preview, I think you're going to be able to tell the excitement that I have for this race coming up tomorrow. Of course, at 2 p.m. UK time. I mean, you can see the grid on the left-hand side. If you're watching. What a grid that is. You couldn't have wished maybe for anything better than that. An incredible grid. An incredible grid that is going to lead to a great battle for victory between probably three drivers. Maybe not for the entire race, but at least for the first 10-15 laps. The midfield fight is going to be endless between basically everyone. It's just going to be such a great race, and I cannot wait to get into it here with you guys over the next 45 minutes or an hour, how long we go. Hopefully you guys are doing well on what is Saturday tea time for me here in the UK, and hopefully you're just as excited as me, and we'll give your thoughts in the chat and also the comment section down below as to what you think is going to happen in the Grand Prix tomorrow. And of course, we'll move through the field and talk about the different battles that should occur. But, I mean, you can see the qualifying results there on the left. But if you want to see the lap times as well, let me show them. Lewis Hamilton took pole by 0.03 of a second from Sergio Perez. Second, Max Verstappen ended up third. Verstappen, as we'll get on to in a minute, bottled pole position for sure. Charles Leclerc P4, Pierre Gasly P5, Daniel Ricciardo somehow qualifying in 6th place, Lando Norris in P7, Valtteri Bottas 8th. So poor, so poor. Esteban Ocon 9th, and then Lance Stroll in 10th. And completing the field, you got Carlos Sainz, George Russell, Vettel, Latifi, Alonso, Raikkonen, Giovinazzi, Mick Schumacher, Nikita Mazepin. And then, of course, crashing out of qualifying before he could complete a lap, Yuki Tsunoda in the AlphaTauri. But what a grid that is, and I cannot wait for tomorrow's race. Honestly, I wish it was right after that session, because it would... I know it is going to turn out to be at least a good Grand Prix, because there's so many battles and there's so many intriguing, I guess you could say, storylines going into the race. But I think we'll start off at the front of the field. Start with Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton, I thought maybe he didn't deserve... Well, he did deserve pole position because he, did his lap. He didn't make a mistake when Perez apparently made a slight one, according to himself, and Verstappen, we saw, actually did. But Hamilton, I think we can say, wasn't quite... This weekend so far especially hasn't been at his absolute best. He's not in the best car. And I'll show the data in a minute which proves that when it comes to Mercedes versus Red Bull. But if you look at this weekend so far, Bottas has had the edge on him a lot of the time. And I know Hamilton, of course, has out-qualified him massively. But this weekend, Hamilton hasn't really looked, at his absolute best, but still, and I think that just shows how great he is, that he still ends up getting pole position. I still think he is in for a very tough fight in the Grand Prix tomorrow, because his teammate, of course, won't be in that battle, being down in 8th place. So Red Bull, in effect, could do to Lewis Hamilton what Mercedes did to Max Verstappen in Bahrain, which is split the strategy and just try and force Mercedes into eventually making a mistake under the enormous pressure of fighting for victory. And I think, honestly, Red Bull's strategy is a dangerous one for Mercedes, because, of course, you've got Sergio Perez, who's on the front row. He'll be starting on the soft compound tyre, when Lewis Hamilton is on the medium, and then Verstappen, of course, is on the medium. And I think Max, again, like I said, and we'll get onto a bit more in a moment, Max should have got pole today, and I think he does, or he is in probably a car that is a tad bit quicker than the Mercedes. So it's going to be really tough for Mercedes tomorrow to get the race win. I still believe they can because it is Mercedes, and as long as they can ace everything and hope that Perez maybe holds Verstappen up a bit, which I don't see happening for too long because, of course, same team, so I'm sure Perez will just move out the way if that does occur. But I think, just like Bahrain, Mercedes are going to have to be at their absolute best to beat Red Bull, because Red Bull are looking very good, looking very strong, without a doubt. But I still believe in Hamilton and Mercedes, and I still think ultimately they will find a way to win the Grand Prix. And I think Sergio Perez being second really does actually hurt Verstappen more than it helps him, because the only way it will hurt Hamilton and help Verstappen is if Sergio Perez gets into the lead on the first lap. Now, he can, without a doubt. I mean, again, he starts on the fresher tyres, and there's a bit of a long run down to turn, or the first braking zone, which is turn 2. So if Perez can get in the slipstream straight away and get past, then yeah, that'd be great. But if Perez does not get into the lead, which I say the chances are that he probably won't, because it is pretty hard at the front of the grid to make a move for the lead. I mean, we don't see it as often as you think in Formula 1 on the first, or, off the start. Especially at Imola, because it is pretty hard to overtake, even on the starting grid at Imola, because it's so tight, especially where it narrows towards turn 2. If Perez then is second and Verstappen is third, then, I mean, Max is going to be behind Perez for 3 or 4 laps? And we'll probably lose a bit of time to Perez, because I think the medium tyre, without doubt, is going to be the quicker tyre. Even after 4 or 5 laps, you'll start to see that. And I think Verstappen is definitely the faster of the Red Bull drivers, despite his mistakes. So I think going into the race, I'd have to go Hamilton is being the favourite. Not clear favourite, but just about, because I think with Red Bull, because Verstappen's third and not second, if Verstappen was second, it'd be a massively different story. But because he's third, unless he can get up to second on the first lap, which again, it'd be hard because making gains off the start at Imola, again, because of how narrow the track is tough. If he remains third, it's going to be tough to see how Red Bull can win, because they need too much to go their way. What they need is Perez to get the lead, and then once Perez's tyres start going off, for Perez to hold Lewis Hamilton up. So either Max Verstappen could do an undercut if he does have enough of a gap behind him to come out and have free air, or to hold Hamilton up so Max can be right on Lewis's gearbox. But if he does that, Hamilton will presumably still have DRS on Perez, so Verstappen won't be able to make a move. So essentially, unless Max Verstappen gets a godlike start, the only way for Max Verstappen to win the Grand Prix is, in my opinion, if Perez gets the lead, holds Hamilton up, and then Verstappen pits to do an undercut. And then Hamilton, I'm sure, would respond the lap later, and then Verstappen gets the lead that way. That's the only way I can think of Verstappen winning the race, if it's Perez leading the race and then, again, using that tactic of holding up Hamilton and backing him into Verstappen. That's the only way I can see Verstappen winning. Again, though, if Verstappen gets into second on the first lap, then it completely changes the complexion of the race. Because then, between Hamilton and Verstappen, it will come down most likely to the pit stops, and not just an undercut, but an overcut as well. Because overcuts do actually work quite well at Imola, due to the tyre wear not being as bad at this track as it is in Bahrain, but also if you are in a bit of traffic or a car ahead, it does hurt you massively at Imola compared to Bahrain, because you can't just fly past Imola because it's very hard to overtake. If you don't overtake on the pit straight, you're not going to overtake. So I'd have to go Hamilton as the slight favourite at the minute. I think it'll be close, though. I don't think Hamilton's going to dominate the race, and I don't think if Max somehow gets the lead on the first lap, he's going to dominate. It's going to be 2 or 3 seconds at most separating Hamilton and Verstappen at the end of the race on Sunday. But Perez, I think, plays the most important role in that battle. I think for sure. If he, again, can get into the lead and then help the team by, holding Hamilton up, then I think that's the best chance I can see of them getting the win. And also, when I said the best chance is, Perez holding Hamilton up and then Verstappen doing an undercut that way. I mean, of course, it'd be great if they can do that and if they have the gap behind them to drop into when they've not got any dirty air or any traffic. But if the midfield, pace-wise, is not that far off and is maybe not similar to today, because it was very close today. I mean, there was only, 0.8 of a second covering the top 8, or half a second covering the top 8, something like that. I mean, it was very close. I don't think it'll be that way tomorrow, but they've got to hope that the midfield is quite a bit slower than those, than they are at the front with Hamilton. Because they don't want to go too far into the race to start deploying that tactic, because I'm sure Hamilton will just come into the pits anyway. So, again, a lot of things have got to go right. It can happen. It can absolutely happen. But I'd have to give it to Hamilton in terms of being the favourite. And I think he will win the Grand Prix, Lewis Hamilton. I think Verstappen will finish in second and will be close. But again, I think Verstappen will look back on today's qualifying session. I think we'll move on to Red Bull now. And of course, Sergio Perez on screen did great, but if Verstappen had not made that mistake at turn 3, Verstappen would have got pole. Now, of course, he made the mistake, so he doesn't deserve to be on pole because it's his own fault why he's not on pole. But, if you're going to win the race at Imola, you've got to be on the front row. You really have to. I mean, there are cases in the past where a driver who starts third or on the second row has won the race, but a lot of things have gone right for them. Either an amazing start or reliability problems for other people and stuff like that. It's very hard to win this Grand Prix at this track, starting third on the grid on pure pace, because it's so hard to overtake. So I think Max, if he does not win the Grand Prix, which I don't believe he will, even though it'll be close, you've got to look at qualifying today and say that's where he blew it. And it's a shame, because we want to see Verstappen and Hamilton, doesn't really matter in what order, on the front row with each other, fighting against each other, because they are by far the two best drivers on the grid at the minute. So yeah, Max Verstappen really did blow it big time. I am really happy though for Sergio Perez, and I think definitely he's on for a podium. I don't think he'll win the race or finish in second. I think third place has got to be his aim. And yeah, as long as he gets a podium, that's all you can ask of him. He's not as good of a driver as Hamilton and Verstappen. I know he was very close today, and he did put in a great performance, but he's not as good as those two. The only thing that may surprise us tomorrow, and we know his race pace and tyre management is great, but if it's even better than we thought it was tomorrow, then maybe that will give him a bit of a better chance of a second place or even a race win, which I'm not even going to try and think about, because I just don't think it will happen. But I think his aim has got to be a podium. And then for Max Verstappen, his race has literally just got to be get ahead of Perez as soon as possible, preferably at the start, and then try and be within a couple seconds of Hamilton until the first and what is likely to be only around the pit stops, and then either find a way past through an undercut or an overcut. That's the only way I think he can win the Grand Prix if Perez doesn't play his part and is not a factor. And if Verstappen gets up to second on the first lap. Again, if Perez gets into the lead on the first lap, then Verstappen, you know, can still win the race, but it's just different circumstances. But it's difficult to see, honestly, Red Bull winning the race. I hope they can at least battle, though, for the race win with Lewis Hamilton. I'm sure, you know, tomorrow I'll be just massively incorrect and we'll probably get something mental happen. You know, a collision on the first lap between all three of them, and then, you know, Charles Leclerc wins the race or something. But yeah, I think it's going to be very close between the front three. I think Perez will probably end up 10 to 15 seconds off the win in the end. And then, you know, it'd be 2 or 3 seconds between Hamilton and Verstappen at most. It's going to be a great Grand Prix, for sure, between those front three. Just want to ask you guys down in the chat, what do you think will happen and who do you think will win? And for Red Bull to win, what do they need to do in your opinion? Do they need to do what I said, get Perez ahead of Hamilton on the first lap and then hold Lewis up so Max can be right on the back of him and then try and do an undercut? Or do you think Max can get into second place on the first lap and then just put in a stunning in or out lap to get the lead off of Hamilton through the pit stop phase? Do you think that can happen, or do you think it'll be a different way? Let me know in the live chat. Right, let me have a quick look. Nominal time says Red Bull will cover the constructors gap, I think. Perez gets the first pick of strategy. Well, no, that's not the case. Max Verstappen will be getting the first pick of strategy, I can guarantee you that, because he is literally, you know, the team is built around him and is basically for him. He will be on the optimal strategy, I can guarantee you that. Perez, again, will be used tactically, and I don't think Perez has any problem with that. Tonka says Perez will make those soft tyres last until Mercedes pit. I'd be surprised if he could. I think Perez, his aim has got to be to get until lap, say, 15 to 20, somewhere there on those compounded tyres, and then preferably put on the hard compound and then go to the end. And then Max and Lewis, I'm sure, will be going into at least, if they can, and this would obviously help build a gap to the midfield, they'll want to be going into at least, say, lap 25 on those tyres, the medium tyres, and then putting probably the hard compound on to go to the end. Yeah, I think Perez, he can get 15 laps at least out of them, maybe 20. Thing is, though, if they really start dropping off badly, then that's really going to affect his race. Because he might have to pit maybe a bit earlier than he should do. But if he gets, again, 15 to 20 laps into the race, then that'll help him in his, I wouldn't say struggle, but in his effort, rather, to get a podium. By the way, thank you for the donation from Still I Rise for $4.44, who says, for Lando and Lewis. Thank you very much for that, mate. Francisco says Red Bull need to attack with both drivers, undercut and overcut, maybe also helped by safety car. Yeah, that'll play a factor. Just hard to say how it will play a factor because we don't know. If it does come out, we don't know when and what effect it'll have. Let me look at some other comments here if I can. Seirugara says Perez will only get the optimal strategy if he is in front of Verstappen. If he's in front of Verstappen and he's clearly quicker, then yeah, he will get the optimal strategy. But if he's ahead of Verstappen and Verstappen's right behind him, Verstappen will get the optimal strategy. Let's be honest, guys. Max is the clear number one. They will, you know, if they think they can get him up a position with the best strategy possible at whatever time in the Grand Prix, then they will be pitting him rather than Perez. And I think Perez completely understands that. Right, let's look at some other comments here if I can. Francisco says Schumi started way down in 2005, was right there at the end. That's that's an exception to the rule, I would say, about grid position here at Imola. I wouldn't say that's anything to be expected. I will say in the midfield, though, I think overcuts will be very powerful tomorrow. From, say, Sainz, Vettel, Alonso, drivers like that. But they're not going to be, getting a podium or anything. But it will help once those upper midfield drivers pit from the soft compound tyre. They will be helped massively by those drivers most likely being held up by cars who have started on a harder compound who are going longer into the Grand Prix. Kind of like it did last year. That's what I think allowed Sergio Perez to do so well until the safety car at the end where Racing Point made a massive mistake, and also Raikkonen as well. So that's another thing to look out for definitely in the midfield is the overcut. Is there any more? You know what? I think what we'll do is move on to the sector times. So, I brought this up, of course, when I did the race preview in Bahrain, and I thought it was very interesting. Gave us a lot better of an idea what was going to happen in the race, and I think we got it a lot more accurate as to what we thought would happen, in the race. So, maybe not in terms of the result, but in terms of speed. And I think these sector times from qualifying will show who you can expect tomorrow to be doing what. So in the first sector, it looks as though you've got, McLaren, Red Bull, Mercedes, maybe not in that order, but those are the best three teams in that sector without a doubt. The first sector is really a power sector. You're on the throttle for, 80% of the time, so that's where, and you can kind of see, with Charles Leclerc being 0.3 of a second off Lando Norris in the first sector alone. And of course, Ferrari are still lacking, say, 5 to 6 kilometers an hour compared to the Mercedes PU. You can see, the difference there. So again, 0.3 of a second, that's quite a bit. So with McLaren, who we'll get into in a minute, I think you can absolutely expect, if they get within a second of, maybe not Gasly, because Gasly, as you can see on those sector times, looking pretty quick as well. But if they are within a second of Charles Leclerc, I think without doubt there is going to be an overtake made, because in that first sector, the McLaren is so much quicker than the Ferrari. And the Ferrari really makes up its lap time, as you can see, in the second and third sectors, where it's in the second and third sector, the Ferrari looks as though it's about equal, if not slightly better, than the Mercedes, which is, very interesting. And then, in the second sector, Red Bull 1 and 2 in the second sector. You could see by the way the car's moving around, the Red Bull did look very good in that, and then Charles Leclerc up there as well, with Gasly, Norris, and then Bottas, Hamilton, Ricciardo, Stroll. I think when it comes to Mercedes versus Red Bull, I think you can see in these sector times that Red Bull were in qualifying today quicker than the Mercedes. Not massively quicker. I'd say 1/10 of a second, about that. It's still very close between the two, but Red Bull did have the quicker car today. And that's why I said they'll be disappointed not to get pole, because they really should have capitalised on that. Now, if Verstappen, again, can get up to second on the first lap, that's why I think it'll be so close and almost equal on lap time, because it is almost equal on lap time anyway, between the two in qualifying in the sectors. So I think without doubt, going to be a very close fight for the race win. And then, of course, you got Charles Leclerc, again, lapping just as quick as Red Bull. Maybe not Red Bull, but say the second of those top two teams, whoever it may be, in the more aerodynamic parts of the track. It's so impressive, honestly, from him and also the Ferrari car. And I do think this season, because of the new system, that the lower down you finished last year in the constructors, the more time you'll get in the wind tunnel to develop your car. I mean, I know Ferrari is concentrating a lot on 2022, but if they put some development into this year's car, I think Ferrari could win a race this season because, I mean, you see the sector times, Leclerc faster than both Mercedes by, what, half a tenth to a tenth in Sector 2, and then in Sector 3, he's at worst a tenth of a second off. So they are in there when the track is a bit more to their liking, and that's why I think when we go to, say, Catalonia, Monaco, even maybe, if Turkey replaces the Canadian Grand Prix, those races that will be coming up very quickly on us, Ferrari are going to be really strong, especially with Charles Leclerc being as good as he has been at getting the absolute most out of the car. Carlos Sainz has done that a bit here and there. He's still finding his way, I think, with Ferrari, and I think he will get there. But Ferrari, they're not far away. I mean, you saw in qualifying today, Leclerc was what? 2 or 3 tenths of a second off pole position? And again, you look at the sector times, except the only reason they're so far off, well, not so far off, you know what I mean, they're that gap off is because of the first sector. That's where they lost time. If the first sector was like the second sector in terms of the amount of medium speed corners, Ferrari could have got pole today. That's how good the Ferrari car is compared to last year. So I think without doubt, you've got to look out for them. I'd say the next Grand Prix even, look out for them, because Portimao, I mean, the final sector, I mean, you've got that long straight, and that definitely does make a difference, but the first 2 sectors, you need a lot of grip. So expect Ferrari, I think, next 2 or 3 races to really be strong. Again, maybe even get a podium, might even compete for a race win. They've got a car that's almost there. And again, if they can develop the car well with the developments they'll bring for 2021, because they'll get more development time, I think Ferrari can win a race. I think they absolutely can. AlphaTauri as well. I thought if you look at the sector times with Pierre Gasly, of course, not Yuki Tsunoda, I thought AlphaTauri also pretty good. McLaren, it looks as though McLaren's strength really is the more power dominant parts of the track, which is why Lando Norris and even Daniel Ricciardo, who wasn't that quick this weekend, is so high up compared to where they should be, and then quite a bit lower down in the more aerodynamic parts of the circuit. But I think for tomorrow's race, you've got Mercedes and Red Bull basically equal, and then I'd say the third fastest car is probably the Ferrari, then the AlphaTauri, and then McLaren 5th. I think McLaren, though, could still finish with the top 5 because it is still really close. I think especially between Gasly and the 2 McLarens, it's going to be so close, the battle between those 3. And then after that, judging by the sector times, I mean, Carlos Sainz, he'll make moves through the field because obviously the Ferrari's looking really good. I think you'd have to say Alpine as well. They're looking like they probably have a tad quicker car than Aston Martin. And probably will have a tad quicker car in the race. So it's probably, Mercedes, Red Bull, obviously the top 2, basically equal, then Ferrari. And then 4th, probably McLaren 4th, AlphaTauri 5th, but they're basically equal. And then the next 2, Aston Martin and Alpine. And then after that, looks as though it's Williams, Alfa Romeo, Haas. But you can see what I mean in terms of how close it is. But I think from these sector times, without a doubt, the key for me, in terms of looking at this Grand Prix coming up tomorrow, but coming up for the future, certain races, is Charles Leclerc's sector times. I think they are really not ominous, but it showcases that Ferrari have a lot of potential this season. a lot of potential. And when we get to a track like, again, Catalonia or Monaco, which is coming up in, the next month, you could see Ferrari actually contending for victory. You really could. You really, really could, especially with Leclerc and, Monaco Grand Prix, his home race. I'm sure we're going to see something special for that. So I cannot wait to see what Ferrari can do in the next 3 races, because I think they might actually join that Mercedes Red Bull battle for a few races. We'll see, though, of course. Anyway, McLaren, they'll be disappointed that Lando Norris got his time deleted, and of course he was, I think he said sorry or something like that. I mean, he doesn't really have to apologise. It was a slight mistake. Many drivers made that mistake. And it cost him most likely 4th on the grid, I think. Or maybe even 3rd. I can't remember exactly what his lap time was, but it was very close to pole position. And I think because he's dropped down to 7th place, it will without doubt affect his race result, because he got held up behind cars that are probably slower than him. So yeah, I think Lando is... I think he could probably finish in 5th still. He has been quicker than Ricciardo all weekend, and I think Ricciardo's got to thank his lucky stars that he's somehow outqualified his teammate, because Lando was miles clear of Ricciardo up until the very end of qualifying, where Lando simply finished behind because he had a track violation, or a lap time violation rather. But McLaren, I think, like I just said, if Gasly, let's say Gasly's ahead of Leclerc and then Leclerc is under pressure from the 2 McLarens, I think McLaren could end up getting themselves past Leclerc, not because they've got the overall quicker car, but simply because they have so much of a quicker car in the first sector. And of course, DRS open compared to Leclerc without DRS. I mean, that's going to be really hurting for Ferrari. But... it's going to be a tough race. It really is. I don't think they'll drop back from their position. I mean, you got Valtteri Bottas in 8th place. And I didn't really get on to Bottas, but I honestly don't think Bottas is really going to move up from that position, because Leclerc, Gasly, Ricciardo, Norris aren't that much slower than the front runners, and Bottas is on the medium, so he'll start the race for the first 5 or 6 laps at not that great a speed. So I think Bottas, I mean, he could probably finish, 6th? Maybe 5th at best, but I don't see Valtteri Bottas on the podium. But I think McLaren is going to be kind of it's going to take a long time for their race to really come to them, because I think once we get towards the pit stop phase, I think that's when McLaren's race will really come alive, because I do think McLaren have probably just about the best race pace of any of the midfield teams. But because they won't be able to overtake as well as they were in Bahrain, they'll have to use it again around the pit stop phases rather than, on track with overtakes. They could still do it on track, but it's going to be a lot harder, as I said. But they are still in for a decent result, because if you look at Ferrari, I mean, they've got one car, of course, in 4th place, but, Sainz 11th, and then AlphaTauri, even though, Gasly 5th, Tsunoda's at the back. So if you look at, as a team, McLaren still look pretty strong compared to everyone else, and I think they'll still get a good result. And even if they finish in 6th and 7th place, that's 14 points. Added on to what would be 18 so far. So that's a pretty good start for McLaren if they were to get that. So I think McLaren, they're going to have a decent race tomorrow. Nothing special. Look out for Lando Norris, though, because he was very quick today. As I said, though, with Ferrari, another good qualifying session, I think. I mean, Carlos Sainz down in 11th. That was disappointing. And I think Carlos definitely is still finding his feet at Ferrari, and I think once he does, he'll really fly along, because he is in that car just as quick as Charles Leclerc. I think we've seen evidence at times of that, so I think we will get to see that later on in the season, possibly 2 or 3 races down the line. We'll start to see that once we get to, say, Monaco, or even his home race in Spain. Yeah, that'll be disappointing, but still, he's the highest placed driver outside the top 10 to start on whatever tyres he wants to, and as fresh a tyres as possible. So if he can do an overcut, that is really going to help his race result, and he could still end up getting a 7th or an 8th, which would be pretty good around this track. Charles Leclerc 4th, and with him starting on the soft compared to Verstappen 3rd, I mean, we talk about the top 3 battle, but Leclerc could put himself in there, maybe not for the entire race, but certainly for the first few laps if he can make a position up. Because, again, not that easy to overtake, but Charles Leclerc in that Ferrari, which is a lot better nowadays than it was, he's not far off pace-wise. And I think in the race, if he doesn't gain any positions on the front 3, I mean, he will probably drop behind, probably half a second a lap, most likely. I'd say the rate is, again, most likely to be compared to the front 3. So, if that's the case, then he'd probably end up finishing about half a minute off the race win by the end. But I think, just Chelsea scoring in the FA Cup semi-final. No, offside, so there you go. If you guys don't know, I am a Chelsea fan, so that's why I was just mentioning that, as I think some of you do know. I think 4th place has got to be the aim with him. The only danger to Charles Leclerc is, again, because of the lack of speed in the first sector, and of course on the straights, because Ferrari are still lacking about 5 kilometers an hour to Honda and Mercedes, that he might come under threat seriously from Bottas, Ricciardo, Norris, Gasly. So that might be a bit of a worry. But as long as he can stay ahead enough of, Gasly, Ricciardo, Norris, say if they are very close on track, as long as he can finish the lap well and start the lap, a bit too far ahead for them to overtake, I can see Leclerc eventually start to pull away and just, pull away eventually relentlessly and then get 4th place, because I do think the Ferrari is the 3rd quickest car for the race tomorrow. But yeah, Ferrari, like I said, with that data I just showed, without doubt, the future is looking bright. They've just got to make sure they don't go full Ferrari again, which, with this team, I'm sure they're preparing that. Now let's get on to Aston Martin. Lance Stroll. Very good performance. He has been very good this season. In Bahrain, he maximised the performance of the car. Probably didn't even deserve to get a point, to be honest, but he did. And again, that's a great result for him. And today, again, out-qualifies Sebastian Vettel by 3 positions and starts on the top 10. Puts that Aston Martin in the top 10 where it really should not have been. I honestly, coming into qualifying, I thought it was almost impossible for Aston Martin to actually be ahead of Ferrari in this session, in the qualifying session that we had earlier. But he did it with a great lap. It's a shame he had both his lap times deleted in Q3, because he actually would have qualified, I think, in 9th place, because he did have the slightly quicker car in quali trim, even though I think the Alpine is probably going to be the quicker race car. But yeah, I think, again, another great job. And I think he could probably nick a point or 2 tomorrow. I don't see him getting any higher position than that. The only way he could get any higher position is if something happened to the top 8. And something will probably happen to the top 8, but whether he'll be there to capitalise, I don't know. But great performance. Sebastian Vettel 13th. I mean, it's better than what he had in Bahrain. I think he is still, though, a big factor in the race, so I wouldn't just, count him out, because, again, starts the race on whatever tyres he wants to. And the Aston Martin, I think, will still be a big factor in the who finishes in the points, debate in the race tomorrow. But Aston Martin, I have to say, despite their car being quite, I won't say poor, but quite slow compared to where they thought they would be, I have to say the drivers and the team as well, their trackside or on-track performance, rather, is as good as it could be. It really is. They're doing the absolute best they can, because I don't think that car really deserves a points finish at the minute. But it looks as though they could be on for one tomorrow. So it just shows you again how great they have been in that aspect. And I think tomorrow they'll be in the fight, but I'm not sure if they'll get a point. It's going to be hard to see, but it can absolutely happen because of the starting positions of both drivers. Next up, AlphaTauri. Shame for Yuki Tsunoda, but he made a mistake. Typical rookie mistake, I'm afraid. He, turned in, clipped the curb, a bit too much aggression, and then, went into the barriers. Again, typical rookie mistake. And it's a shame, especially because I think he probably would have ended up in the top 8 on the grid because the AlphaTauri is looking very quick. But again, Yuki Tsunoda just not quite getting enough out of his car when the pressure's really on. I think in the race tomorrow, he'll probably make up a few positions at most, but I don't see a points finish at all for him. But for Pierre Gasly, P5, hard to say where he'll finish. It could be 4th, it could be 5th, it could be even 8th place. It's hard to say. It really depends on just the pace of the AlphaTauri compared to McLaren and even Charles Leclerc. And I think they'll all be very close to each other, but I can't really say for sure where he's going to be. A lot will depend on the start and, of course, the pit strategies as well. But one thing I do hope is that he can get, say, a top 6 finish, because if AlphaTauri are going to have anywhere near a season that is deserving a good finish because of how good the car has been so far this season, then they need to start banging in results, and a top 6 finish would be a good result for them. They can't afford, Gasly to have a problem and end up with no points, because that car is way too good to be sitting on 2 points after the first 2 races. They cannot have that at all. So hopefully they get a strong points finish tomorrow, so they're at least in that midfield fight in the Constructors' Championship. Alpine, Esteban Ocon, great performance. I'm not sure I'd say driver of the day, but one of the drivers of the day for sure. One, to out-qualify his teammate Fernando Alonso by so much, and also to get 9th on the grid in a car that looked nowhere near 9th on the grid. A great performance by Esteban Ocon, and even though the race will be tough, racing Stroll, Sainz, Vettel, maybe even his teammate, I think he's probably the most likely out of him and Stroll to get a top 10 finish. Because if you look back at the sector times, the Alpine looked a tad better overall compared to Aston Martin. It's still really close, but I think the Alpine does have better grip than the Aston Martin. Again, it is still close, but I think that'll help in the race tomorrow when it comes to managing tyres and stuff like that. So I think Ocon will be fine in terms of fighting that battle, and I think Ocon will, again, if there is a point to be had out of him or either Lance Stroll, I think it's going to be Esteban Ocon. For Fernando Alonso, though, it's hard to see where he's going to get a point from. I think the best he can do is probably P11 or P12. I don't see him getting that far up into the points. Again, his race is going to come down to literally doing an overcut and then just being really quick at the end. But the problem is his Alpine's not quick enough in a straight line to, to get moves done. So it's going to be a very tough race for Fernando Alonso. Hopefully he can do something, but at least for Alpine, they've got a car in the top 10 again. Hopefully this time they can nick a point, because you never know, if they can improve during the course of the season, then maybe Alpine can make something of 2021. I have to say, though, this team, Alfa Romeo, was so poor. 16th and 17th. That is nowhere near where they should have been. They should have been right at the front of that fight to get into the top 10, but ultimately missing out. That's where they should have been. P11, P12. 16th and 17th is nowhere near good enough, and it's basically where they were, for the 2020 Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. And I know they scored, points with both cars in that race, but it was really down to a lot of retirements rather than, having a genuinely quick enough car. So yeah, I don't see this team scoring points tomorrow. The qualifying performance just wasn't good enough at all. Hopefully there'll be improvement in the next qualifying session, of course, in Portugal, where I think, because the aerodynamics is probably their stronger point, I think Alfa Romeo will probably go stronger at a track like that, or Monaco, or, places like that. But yeah, I thought this weekend in qualifying, at least, they'd put in a strong performance, but no, really poor, and that's really disappointing. One team that put in a great performance, though, is Williams, 12th and 14th on the grid. Now, I don't think they'll score points tomorrow because I don't think they have the car for it, but both drivers should be taking a bow because their performance was great. Russell, P12, ahead of Vettel and Alonso, and Raikkonen on the grid. What a performance. And Nicholas Latifi even. What a performance by him. Out-qualifying an Alpine and an Alfa Romeo when normally Latifi is 18th at best, 17th at best. I don't think he has got into the next stage of qualifying into Q2 ever. Or maybe he has, but it's been like once or twice and he's ended up just miles behind in 15th place. But what a performance by Nicholas Latifi, really. It was so great. So happy for the guy to get into Q2. And Williams, clearly, maybe not for the race, but clearly in qualifying trim, they had the 8th best car out of the 10. And that is massive progress because this time last year, they probably had the 9th best car when they raced at Imola. So, again, great progression. Great to see. And hopefully the race, if there is a few retirements, and hopefully a points finish is a coming for this team. We're not going to get into Haas F1 because, they're not even trying to be good, so why even bother with them? But that is the race preview, guys. Let me just quickly, though, before I finish, read some of your comments. See what you guys have to think going into the race tomorrow. And again, let me know for the midfield, who are you looking out for in terms of winning the midfield battle, and who are the dark horses, say, starting outside the top 10? Let me know. Right, let me have a look here. Bold prediction from Rise, who says Perez to beat Bottas in the championship. If he keeps up this performance, then I don't see why not. I mean, he is a better driver than Valtteri Bottas. I have no doubt about that. But, yeah, I don't see why not. The only way Bottas is going to beat Perez is if, and again, this relies on Perez keeping up this level of performance. But, the only way Bottas can beat Perez again is if Mercedes just eventually have a car that's just easily quicker. Which, because again of the new rules that you can only develop your car for so long, depending on where you finish in the constructors. I mean, Mercedes, they'll bring an upgrade, but I'm not sure Mercedes are at all this season going to be clearly faster than Red Bull. I mean, they'll get plenty of pole positions. Don't even, think about that. They really will get plenty of poles. But in terms of them getting poles and front rows and being miles clear, I don't think that will be the case this season because, again, of those rules about wind tunnel time, and also the way the season started, it looks as though Red Bull, at least in qualifying trim, have the slightly quicker car. I don't know yet that Red Bull have in race trim a quicker car. We didn't really get to see that in Bahrain because in Bahrain, I mean, Verstappen pulled the gap out to 2 seconds in the first stint, and then Hamilton pitted, did the undercut, then Verstappen pitted a lot later, and we didn't really get to see what the head-to-head pace was because Verstappen either had much fresher tyres or Lewis Hamilton had much fresher tyres, so we couldn't really compare lap times. Hopefully in tomorrow's race, if they stay out on track for a long time, we'll get to see whether the Red Bull is a quicker car in terms of race pace. I think the Red Bull car is a quicker car in terms of race pace, probably by a quarter of a second. But again, until I see the data, the lap times tomorrow pointing to that being the case, I can't say that that is absolutely the case. That's just my guess, basically. Right, let me see some other comments here quick and read some out. Nominal Time says, I also think Checo deserves the optimal strategy. He beat Max today in Q3. Perez's tyres will last most of the life of Max's mediums. I think the key part of that sentence that he said at the end is most of the life. And in Formula 1, even if your tyres last that 4 or 5 laps longer, it does make a massive difference in a Grand Prix when you're in a close fight. And yeah, Perez, look, did Sergio Perez deserve to beat Max Verstappen today? Yeah, because at the end of the day, Max ended up behind because Max made a mistake. But when they're both not making mistakes and are both on it, Max Verstappen is quicker. And Max Verstappen is the number 1 driver. And Max Verstappen, if there is going to be a championship challenge, will be the driver competing for the championship. So you can't just say after one mistake, one qualifying session, well, Perez, he should be given the optimal strategy. You can't do that. I mean, look back in the day at Ferrari with Schumacher and Barrichello. There were days where Schumacher was slower than Barrichello in qualifying. And, those things happened. Doesn't mean they then gave Barrichello the strategy to win the race because they knew it was just, a bit of a blip or just a blip. So if they want to win the race tomorrow, they need to give Verstappen the optimal strategy, not Perez. And look, I love Perez, but with the tyre he's starting on and with him as a driver combined with that car, most likely Sergio Perez is not really going to win the race tomorrow. I mean, his chances aren't that great. Verstappen's chances are a lot better because of the tyre he starts on and because it's him in that car. So you've got to give him the optimal strategy, not Sergio Perez. And again, I love Perez, but if you're, Mr. Horner running the Red Bull team, you've still got to put all your eggs in Max Verstappen's basket in terms of if you're going to win the race, picking between either Verstappen or Perez. Because again, Verstappen being on the medium will be a lot better for him to contend for victory. The only hope for Perez to win is if he gets into the lead on the first lap. I don't think he'll win the race if he is still second on the first lap. I don't see that at all. If he gets into the lead on the first lap and then something happens to Hamilton, a problem or something, then I think Sergio Perez can win then. But again, too much needs to go right for him to win. So I think really Red Bull need to back Verstappen with an optimal strat there. KG says, "What's up, fam? Can someone explain to me why Lando's time was deleted? I thought I saw both of the Mercedes exceeding track limits in the same spot as Norris." It's some weird inconsistency. I guess there's probably some sort of sensor or something that they have, the FIA, and Lando must have broke it and the Mercedes cars didn't. Yeah, that's all I can think of, really. Such a disappointment, but at the end of the day, the rules were the same for everyone, so he can't complain too much. Right, let me find some final comments here before we get on to the end of the stream. Henry O'Boyle says Red Bull could pull Checo in early and keep Max out longer. That would match their starting tyres, and with their small pace advantage, whichever one Hamilton doesn't cover off wins. Yeah, exactly. That's how Red Bull really, I mean, and again, with Perez pitting earlier and then Verstappen pitting later, that strategy only works if one of the Red Bulls is in the lead. Because if Hamilton is leading, Hamilton will eventually start to pull away quite handsomely because he's on the better tyre, the better race tyre compared to, say, Sergio Perez, if Perez is still second. But again, if Perez is leading and then Hamilton's second, Verstappen third, then yeah, if Perez pits first and it has, backed Hamilton into Verstappen, and then Verstappen either will probably go, so let's say goes longer, because Hamilton would have to probably cover off Perez unless Hamilton thought, or Mercedes thought rather, that they could go longer and cover that eventuality off. Then yeah, like you said, that could work. It's going to be very close, though, between the front three. I think, just like Bahrain, I remember saying it when I did the race preview for the Bahrain Grand Prix, that the race win is going to come down to fine margins. It's going to come down to a pit stop, an out lap, an in lap. It's not going to be one at the start of the race, unless there's a massive crash between two of the three contenders. It's not going to be that way. It's going to come down again to a brief 30-second moment somewhere in the middle of the Grand Prix. Hopefully, though, it's a thing that we keep across and excites us for the entire of the 63 laps in tomorrow's Grand Prix. But guys, thank you very much for coming along to this stream. Really appreciate it. And yeah, that is it for the Saturday content. I'm absolutely knackered, I have to tell you. But yeah, tomorrow, 1:30 p.m. UK time, I will be live for the race watch along for the 2021 Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. Of course, be live with Nib, so we'll be doing the duo commentary again. Cannot wait to do that with him. So don't forget to come along to that and subscribe to the channel for that content, and hit the notifications bell. You can subscribe by going to the bottom right of the screen and doing it there, or go to my channel page. And again, make sure you're subbed and ready for 1:30 p.m. UK time not later on tonight. What am I on about? On Sunday, make sure you're ready for that. Half an hour before the race starts, if you're living in a time zone that is a bit far removed from the UK. As well, smash a like button. Don't forget as well to share this video everywhere you can. Don't forget as well to join the Discord server, link below in the description. There are, almost 500 people in that server, and plenty of people in there talking F1 all the time. So if you want to talk F1 with people, make sure to go and join that. And also, great place to be notified as to videos and streams. So make sure to join that. As well, importantly, comment down below what you thought of qualifying and what do you think will happen in the race tomorrow. How do Red Bull win the race, in your opinion? Who do you think will win the race? And what do you think will happen in the midfield as well? Let me know in the comments section down below. But guys, until 1:30 p.m. UK time tomorrow for the second race of 2021, the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix at Imola, where we're set for an intriguing, I think it's 63 laps of the race at Imola. Until then, guys, it's been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.